Kwame Nkrumah and Sylvanus Olympio, two visionary leaders who played pivotal roles in Africa's fight for independence. While united by their desire to free the continent from colonial rule, their paths diverged sharply over the future of Africa. This is the story of their intertwined destinies, their shared dreams, their differences, and their tragic downfalls. Kwame Nkrumah was born on September 21, 1909, in Nkroful, a small village in the Gold Coast. Raised in humble beginnings, Nkrumah excelled in school and eventually enrolled at Ashimota School, where he became passionate about education and politics. In 1935, he traveled to the United States to study at Lincoln University and the University of Pennsylvania, immersing himself in the works of Karl Marx, Mahatma Gandhi, and Pan-Africanist thinkers like Marcus Garvey and Webb Du Bois. These ideas would later shape his vision for a united Africa. Sylvanus Olympio, born on September 6, 1902 in Pando, German Togoland, came from an influential Ewe family with a strong European education background. He attended the London School of Economics, where he excelled as a student of economics and international law. Olympio's corporate journey saw him rise to become the first African executive at the United Africa Company, a British trading firm. While Nkrumah's path was shaped by activism and ideology, Olympio's focused on diplomacy, pragmatism, and economic strategy. These early differences would later influence their leadership styles and visions for their nations. By the late 1940s, as African nationalist movements gained momentum across the continent, both leaders felt it was time for their respective countries to take their place in history. In 1945, Nkrumah and Olympio joined prominent figures such as Jomo Kenyatta and Webb Du Bois at the Pan-African Congress in Manchester, an event that energized African leaders in their fight against colonialism. For both leaders, this was a pivotal moment. Olympio declared his vision for full sovereignty rested on a strategy of gradual decolonization, prioritizing economic stability as the foundation for an independent Togo. In 1946, he co-founded the Togolese Unity Committee, CUT, alongside other nationalist leaders, aiming to unite the Togolese people under a single movement for self-determination. The CUT quickly gained traction, drawing support from farmers, traders, and the urban elite, eventually becoming Togo's dominant political force. However, despite peaceful protests and formal petitions, the French colonial authorities resisted change, resorting to arrests, intimidation, and political sabotage to maintain control. Yet in the face of mounting obstacles, Olympio remained resolute. The movement's growth was driven by the people's unwavering determination to break free from colonial rule. In stark contrast to Olympio's gradual approach to decolonization, Kwame Nkrumah pursued a swift and uncompromising path to independence. Inspired by the Pan-African Congress's call for immediate action in 1947, he returned to the Gold Coast and mobilized a mass movement, demanding an end to colonial rule without delay. He swiftly rose to prominence as the General Secretary of the United Gold Coast Convention, UGCC, a political party advocating for self-rule.
At the first meeting, Kwame explained to them very clearly the sort of program which he was going to follow. He recommended that there should be a very strong organization and that there should be branches all over the country, and that their demand for self-government should be backed with demonstrations, strikes, and boycotts, which of course the UGCC leaders did not like, nor were they enamored with his fiery speeches and trenchant articles against imperialism and decolonization. And therefore, those of us who were close to Kwame were not looked at in a favorable light.
He had come encouraged by some of our friends in England to watch the people he called reactionaries. And actually, talking to him, I got the impression that he was not going to be with us for long, for he regarded most of us as being reactionary.
Frustrated by the UGCCC's gradualist approach to decolonization, he broke away in 1949 to establish the Convention People's Party, CPP. With the rallying cry of self-government now, Nkrumah ignited the aspirations of the masses, propelling himself into the forefront of the nation's independence movement.
Positive action, the goals of for independence now, and we link it with India, because India staged positive action during the time of Gandhi, and they achieved independence. So we said we wanted to declare positive action. All our supporters should stay out of work, so that the British government will know what our demands are. And we warn them that nobody should act violently. It must all be without violence.
This contrast in strategies underscored the diverse paths to independence in West Africa, with Olympio advocating patience and diplomacy to ensure sustainable progress, while Nkrumah pursued a bold and immediate push for self-rule.
Forward then, to independence now.
These opposing approaches would ultimately set them on a collision course. Despite French repression, Olympio's strategy extended beyond Togo. In 1947, Sylvanus Olympio addressed the United Nations, advocating for the self-determination of the Togolese people. The people of Togoland deserve the right to determine their destiny, free from external domination. We must be allowed to chart a future that reflects our unique history, culture, and aspirations. His speech marked him as a rising figure in the global fight for decolonization and a voice for the voiceless territories under mandate systems. On the 28th of October 1956, a referendum on autonomy was held in French Togoland. Since World War I, the territory had been a League of Nations mandate and then a United Nations Trust territory under French control. The referendum offered residents the choice of remaining a trust territory or becoming an autonomous region within the French Union. The result was 93% in favor of the latter, with a 77% turnout. However, the referendum was rejected by the United Nations General Assembly, as it had not included the option of independence, and opted to continue with the trusteeship. In neighbouring British Togoland, a referendum held in May of the same year determined the territory's future. The results showed that 58% of voters opted to merge with the adjacent British Crown colony of the Gold Coast, marking a significant step toward Ghana's independence. While Nkrumah celebrated this as a victory for African unity, the outcome left the Airway people divided between British and French Togoland. Olympio viewed the integration as a betrayal of their aspirations and a direct threat to Togo's sovereignty. British and French Togoland had been intended to work toward reunification after World War I, preserving the Airway people within the borders of a single nation called Togoland. This decision, he argued, disregarded the Airway people's right to self-determination and undermined Togo's sovereignty. For Nkrumah, the unification of Africa had to start with practical steps, beginning with the integration of Togoland into the Gold Coast.
In a united Africa, there could be no frontier claims between Ethiopia and Somalia, or between Ghana, Togoland and the Ivory Coast.
Nkrumah became Ghana's first prime minister in 1957, championing Pan-Africanism and industrialization. Togo followed in 1960 with Olympio as its first president. Determined to secure Togo's economic independence, Olympio sought to establish a Togolese currency to replace the CFA franc. Working with a German firm, he aimed to reduce Togo's dependence on France. This bold move alarmed French authorities as it threatened their interests in the region. Though never fully realized, this vision highlighted Olympio's commitment to sovereignty. Olympio's international presence grew. In 1962, he made an official visit to President John F. Kennedy, where the two leaders discussed economic development and Togo's role in the non-aligned movement. Later that year, Olympio appeared on NBC's Meet the Press, where he articulated his vision.
Well, when it's a matter concerning individual freedom and national freedom, we're nationalists, and we believe that the freedom for countries which are still independent are so vital that there can be no compromise on that type of principle. So if it's a question of being neutral on questions of freedom, I can tell you that we are certainly for national and individual freedom.
Africa must strive for independence that is not only political but also economic. We cannot build a future while remaining tied to colonial systems. However, tensions with Nkrumah deepened. Nkrumah accused Olympio of destabilizing Ghana's Volta region, while Olympio alleged that Nkrumah harbored opposition groups plotting against Togo.
Ghana would like to integrate the whole of the Republic of Togo. Having achieved the 1/3 of it, which was a British-mandated Togo, Ghana feels the logical conclusion of such a deal is to incorporate the remaining part of Togo, to which of course we object.
In January 1963, discontent among ex-French soldiers in Togo boiled over. Denied integration into the military, they attacked Olympio's residence on the night of January 12, 13. Fleeing to the US Embassy for safety, Olympio was tragically shot and killed, while Etienne Eyadema claimed responsibility. Some accounts implicate Georges Maitrier, the French commandant of the gendarmerie, suggesting possible French involvement. Olympio's death marked the end of his vision for an independent Togo and raised questions about external influences in African politics. After Sylvanus Olympio's assassination in 1963, there was no widely documented public statement from Kwame Nkrumah regarding the tragic event. Some speculations suggest that Nkrumah may have had a role in the coup, given the tense relations between Ghana and Togo during that period, but concrete evidence is lacking. While there are rumors that Nkrumah could have been involved, particularly due to the growing tensions between the two leaders and their countries, the lack of a public statement from Nkrumah leaves his official stance on Olympio's death largely unknown. This period of silence is a part of the broader historical narrative where questions about external influences and internal politics are still subjects of debate. The tragic end of Sylvanus Olympio marked a pivotal moment for Togo, leaving the dream of sovereignty in uncertainty. Meanwhile, across the border in Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah's Pan-African vision pressed on, facing growing challenges in an ever-changing political landscape. As Togo mourned its fallen leader, Nkrumah reached the height of his influence, striving to unify Africa under one vision. But the years that followed would test his leadership and ideals, leading to a dramatic political downfall. In 1963, Nkrumah played a pivotal role in the formation of the Organization of African Unity, or OAU. His dream of a United States of Africa was a bold and radical vision for a politically and economically unified continent.
Africa is rich and not poor. It is Africans who are poor, not Africa. And they are poor because of the uncounted profit that has been made out of the exploitation of their labor and their lands. For today, we must each see ourselves as part of Africa in order that we may face colonialist imperialism and its new form, neocolonialism, on a continent-wide front. For unity must be the keynote of our actions. Our enemies are many, and they stand ready to pounce upon and exploit our very weakness. They tell us that this particular person or that particular country has greater or more favorable potentialities than the other. They do not tell us that we should unite, that we are all as good as we are able to make ourselves once we are free. Remember, always, that you have 4 stages to make. First, the attainment of freedom and independence. Secondly, the consolidation of that freedom and independence. Thirdly, the creation of unity and community between the free African states. Fourth, the economic and social reconstruction of Africa.
But this dream faced resistance. Leaders like Nigeria's Nnamdi Azikiwe and Senegal's Leopold Sedar Senghor argued for a gradual approach to unity, clashing with Nkrumah's urgent calls for immediate action. By 1964, Nkrumah's leadership style had shifted. Declaring Ghana a one-party state, he consolidated power, making the Convention People's Party the sole political organization in the country. A united front is the only way forward. A referendum granted him near dictatorial powers, including the title of President for Life. While Nkrumah defended this as necessary for national unity, his actions silenced opposition and created deep divisions. Nkrumah's economic vision for Ghana was as ambitious as his political goals. He launched industrial projects like the Volta River project, aimed at generating hydroelectric power, and pushed for rapid infrastructure development.
I remember that the first educational policy, which introduced fee-free education at the primary level, brought out thousands and thousands of children. Factories sprang up all over Accra. All of a sudden, overnight, there were new class of industrial working people. People were earning wages for the first time in their lives.
But these projects came at a cost. Funded through heavy borrowing, Ghana faced mounting debt, and declining cocoa prices further strained the economy. By 1965, the nation was struggling with inflation, food shortages, and trade deficits. Even as Ghana faced challenges at home, Nkrumah remained a staunch advocate for African liberation.
Nkrumah declared, right from the independence, that the independence of Ghana would be meaningless except the whole African states are all liberated.
He provided financial and logistical support to freedom fighters across the continent, earning him admiration abroad but criticism at home for neglecting Ghana's pressing issues.
When Guinea became independent, France withdrew every support and even dismantled services and infrastructure. Ghana went in there and gave them some loans. To some people, Ghana was asked to make too much sacrifices for the independence of other countries in Africa.
Nkrumah's popularity began to wane. He survived multiple assassination attempts, including the Kulungugu bombing in 1962. His use of the Preventive Detention Act to imprison political opponents without trial alienated many, and accusations of corruption within his government fueled public discontent. His political opponents accused him of authoritarianism. In 1964, he declared Ghana a one-party state under the Convention People's Party, CPP, consolidating his power. The Preventive Detention Act allowed him to imprison critics without trial, intensifying public dissent.
He promises of improving human rights record, but when he was in power, those things were not fulfilled. And when the people demand for it, then it's like a crime against the government. So they may be imprisoned and some were even executed.
By 1965, Ghana's economy was in crisis. Workers and students staged protests against deteriorating living conditions, and Nkrumah's once loyal supporters began to question his leadership.
This country was fed up with him. The country was densely hostile to the government. People couldn't breathe. People were choked. They couldn't express any views. People were scared of each other. It was really a terrible atmosphere.
On the global stage, the Cold War magnified tensions. Western powers, wary of his socialist leanings and ties with the Eastern Bloc, became increasingly critical. Nkrumah's close relationships with the Soviet Union and China alarmed them, particularly the United States, which feared his influence over Africa's non-aligned movement. Former CIA officers would later allege that Ghana's destabilization was a priority, with covert operations designed to undermine Nkrumah's government. Nkrumah's vision of a united Africa started to crumble. On February 24, 1966, while Kwame Nkrumah was on a peace mission to China and North Vietnam, his government was overthrown in a military coup. Led by the National Liberation Council, NLC, the coup leaders accused Nkrumah of authoritarianism, corruption, and mismanagement of Ghana's economy. The streets of Accra were filled with celebrations, as citizens, weary of economic hardships and political repression, welcomed the coup.
After Cairo, Nkrumah stopped off in New Delhi to visit India's Prime Minister, Mrs. Gandhi. They discussed his projected peace mission to North Vietnam. But Nkrumah never got as far as Hanoi. It was on arrival in Peking that Chinese leaders broke the news to Nkrumah of his downfall. Mystery surrounded his immediate plans. Conflicting reports said he was going back to Accra, that he was going to Cairo, that he'd gone to Addis Ababa to appeal to the current Conference of African States. In the end, he flew to Moscow on the way to Guinea. But even the Russians were expected to recognize the new regime. In London, while the government held back from the immediate recognition, Ghanaian students were not holding anything back. Also in London, a Ghanaian who claimed leadership of a so-called Revolutionary Council. He said they had masterminded the coup from a flat in West Kensington. His name, Daniel Amir.
We had the okay yesterday about nearly 10 o'clock. We were ready, all waiting, anxiously waiting and sweating. We gave our order go ahead yesterday in the morning, and in the evening we had the reply that order received and operation is ready, stand by for further instructions.
It was a jaunty Mr. Amir who left London next day. But the attention he received in Accra wasn't quite what he'd had in mind. Whatever revolution was hatched in West Kensington, it seemed, had nothing to do with that dawn coup in Accra. Mr. Amir was branded by the real revolutionaries as a charlatan and a criminal, and he was taken off for a session of public penitence at the first news conference called by Ghana's new rulers. Their leader, General Arthur Ankra, father of 22 and former mission schoolteacher, a man who's never concealed his dislike of Nkrumah. Before dealing with Mr. Amir, he had more important business.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to introduce my colleagues to you, some of the members of the National Liberation Council. As you've already been told, I need no introduction myself. But on my left here is the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Harley, who is the Deputy Chairman of the National Liberation Council. On my right is Major General E.K. Kotoka, who is the second member or the first member of the National Liberation Council. We have called you here this morning for one specific reason, and that is you've heard the name of one Amuhia who has associated himself with this coup and had published himself in the British papers and most of the papers that is the brain behind us. And we want to prove that we were not instigated by anybody, neither we want to refute any allegation that ACA or God knows what instigated us to carry out this coup. This coup was carried out completely because of the things that had happened in Ghana and because of the tyranny and the despotism of Kwame Nkrumah, the deposed president. Everybody in Ghana was fed up with it. And therefore you could see the spontaneous result which followed the coup. You would have seen when you were coming probably thinking that Ghana would have been put under curfew or all other things, but nothing was done. There was no brain behind it. It was work from us and from within, without the aid of anybody, any foreign country or any country. It has been some of these things within Ghana that when a ruler is useless, you depose him. And therefore, we have deposed Kwame Nkrumah. We don't want tyranny or anything here. And therefore, I would like to not waste time to bring in Amu here for you to see him. And you can see that he doesn't even know. I don't know him. I haven't seen him before, neither is any of us. The only thing that we know of him since he started claiming himself was that the COP found in his records that he's a criminal who is wanted in Ghana. And we were so quiet because we wanted him. He's a criminal wanted in Ghana, so that we put him in the cold ice chest. Well, this is Mr. Amuhia. He calls himself Amuhia or Amushia or ever. His name is never spelled correct either. And we would like him to tell you how he organized this coup and how he was the brain behind it. And who he knew on this.
First and foremost, on the 24th morning, 8 o'clock news announced in London that Ghana has announced that jointly the army and the police have overthrown the regime of the tyrant, Kwame Nkrumah.
Did you come to brainwash me, Kotoka, the police, or somebody and tell us how to conduct this? Or did you try to tell us where we should, how we should organize our army or the operations to be carried out?
No, sir. This is exactly what I am coming to, sir. If I should be given the opportunity, I shall explain thoroughly as I am before you and before the world press.
General Ankara can squash a Mir, but will he make a national leader?
Of course, he's a very, very experienced soldier. He rose from the ranks. He served in India and Burma during the war as a warrant officer. After the war, he was commissioned and rose steadily up to be a major general. He was retired a few months ago and, of course, has now been brought back as commander of the forces.
He was really kicked out by Nkrumah.
Yes, it was never announced in so many words. In fact, he took the initiative to resign, but he's always been a very popular figure, and he's certainly a remarkably fine general, and I think will be a very good leader.
Do you expect him to stay in charge of Ghana, or do you think
that I don't know at all. One doesn't know how long these military regimes have to last.
However, the overthrow was not purely an internal affair. Declassified documents and accounts from CIA insiders such as John Stockwell later revealed that the United States had been involved in covert efforts to destabilize Nkrumah's regime. While direct involvement in the coup remains debated, the US and its allies clearly saw Nkrumah's Pan-African agenda as a threat to Western influence in Africa. Nkrumah's dream of leading Ghana into a new era of prosperity had come crashing down. The man once hailed as the African Lenin now faced the harsh reality of exile. After his overthrow, Nkrumah sought refuge in Guinea, where President Sékou Touré granted him the honorary title of co-president. Touré shared Nkrumah's vision of Pan-African unity and welcomed him as a brother in their shared struggle against neo-colonialism. In exile, Nkrumah spent his days reflecting on the forces that had toppled his government. He turned to writing, producing seminal works like Dark Days in Ghana, where he exposed the role of Western imperialism in Africa's destabilization, and Class Struggle in Africa, a critique of capitalism and its impact on the continent. But his dreams of a united and prosperous Africa were now a distant memory. But despite his exile, Nkrumah remained a symbol of resistance. His writings inspired a new generation of African leaders, even as his own health began to decline. Kwame Nkrumah's journey from 1963 to his downfall in 1966 is a cautionary tale of vision, ambition, and the limits of power. His policies often divided opinion, but his unwavering commitment to African independence and unity left an indelible mark on history. Today, Nkrumah's name is synonymous with hope and the ongoing struggle for self-reliance in Africa. The African Union, which he helped envision, stands as a testament to his dream of a united continent. In Ghana, his statues and legacy endure, reminding the world of a man who dared to dream of an Africa free from exploitation. Though his leadership ended in exile and disillusionment, Nkrumah's ideals live on in the hearts of millions. He was more than a politician, he was a symbol of what Africa could be. Throughout history, African leaders who dared to envision a future of prosperity and independence for their nations have encountered relentless opposition from powerful forces, ranging from assassinations and coups to intimidation and coercive tactics designed to suppress their ambitions. From Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana and Sylvanus Olympio in Togo, to Patrice Lumumba in Congo and Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, these are just a few among many African leaders whose visions of self-reliance and economic independence were perceived as threats not only to colonial interests, but also to the very foundations of Western prosperity.
It is easy to see that the imperialists and the colonialists are determined to retain the African countries in the position of suppliers of cheap raw materials. If we do not resist this threat, and if we throw in our lot with the common market, we shall doom the economy of Africa to a state of perpetual subjection to the economy of Western Europe.
We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more stories of Africa's past and future.